Hey everybody, it's Brooke with The Buttered Home and welcome to my messy kitchen. Today we are going to be showing you an easy, delicious apple pie. Now, I know what you're thinking, apple pie, that sounds a little intimidating, but I'm going to go through a few things with you that show you that it's really easy and it uses pantry staple items, and you don't even have to make a homemade pie crust if you don't want to. Now, I have, but I like making pie crust. There's nothing I like more doing than coming in my kitchen on Sunday afternoons and prepping for the week for my lunches or making bread, things that just kind of soothe me. And pie crust is one of those. So I will oftentimes be found in my kitchen mixing up enough pie crust to have, and they can be frozen and easily thawed on the counter for reuse. So don't be intimidated by making a homemade pie crust either. If you want that recipe, you can find it at thebutteredhome.com. Now, for this recipe for apple pie, you will need 2 pie crusts, one for the bottom and one for the top. And like I said before, if you don't want to make a homemade pie crust, you certainly don't have to. The store-bought are great, and it can be just as homemade if you use the store-bought pie crust. But the part that usually bothers some people is whether or not you can make a really good apple pie and it not be just a lot of work by using fresh apples. And I'm going to show you that it's not. By it being a top covered pie, your apples cook to perfection, and we've got just a few things to show you how that can be done. The first is going to be using green or Granny Smith apples. These tend to hold up better during the cooking process, and they are tart. So that means when you add all of the sweet components to them that are in an apple pie, you don't have to worry about it being too sweet. So that Granny Smith apple is the one you're going to want to use for a homemade apple pie. And what I have done beforehand is I have made the pie crust and I have it already in my pie plate. This is a deep dish pie plate. This is for a deep dish pie. The apples do better in a deep dish, which is 1.5 to 2 inches deep. Certainly you could modify this to use a regular non-deep dish pie crust and probably just cut out about a cup of your apples. So what I've also done is I have peeled, sliced, and cored my Granny Smith apples ahead of time, and I have them in this bowl here with about a tablespoon of lemon juice because I don't want them to turn brown until they cook. So your prep ahead of time can be done, and that lemon juice will keep them all pretty. These have been done for probably about 30 minutes. So you see how pretty they still are. And the lemon juice also adds just a touch of freshness that you won't be able to detect right off. So we have got just a few other basic components. We have cinnamon, nutmeg, flour, sugar, brown sugar, butter, an egg white, and the pie crust. So that's really all it is, and trust me when I tell you that this is so much better than buying the canned apple pie filling. So I'm going to show you how easy it really comes together. So let's do that now. So in a small bowl, I have about a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and to that I've got a whole nutmeg here, just simply because nutmeg, to me, if you're going to use it, it's better to use it fresh. So I'm just going to just rasp about 1/4 teaspoon. Now, nutmeg is one of those things that some people, either you love it or you hate it. If you hate it, leave it out and just add a tad more cinnamon. Now to this, we're going to add about 1/2 cup of firmly packed brown sugar, and then about 1/2 cup of white sugar. And we're going to just kind of fold those sugars into the cinnamon and the nutmeg. And never fear, if you miss the amounts on this recipe. You can always find this recipe at thebutteredhome.com. We have a nice search option there where you can just type in apple pie and it will come right up. Or you can, if you're watching on YouTube, you can go down to the show notes and there'll be a direct link to that recipe there. Now to this, we're gonna add about 3 tablespoons of plain white lily flour. And that is going to help the sugars turn into a thick, beautiful hug of syrup that will wrap around your apples and turn them from a tart treat to a sweet and warm, belly-filling goodness. That was a lot of adjectives, wasn't it? All right, so now I'm going to take our apples and I'm going to sprinkle this over the top. And I will do this just in stages because you want to make sure that you get those apples completely covered in that sugar and cinnamon and nutmeg mixture. And then I'm going to add the rest of it. Let me try my smaller spatula. Yeah, that works better. And then we are just going to kind of turn those guys around in there and let them get all good and coated. And it's all right if a lot of that mixture still sits on the bottom because it'll still go in the pie. All right, so we're gonna set that aside. And then I have my beautiful homemade pie crust, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that too. If you do make it homemade, I always make it where I can have it in advance. So I will form a small disc and wrap it in plastic wrap and keep it at least overnight in the refrigerator. Then I take it out of the plastic wrap and I will put the disc in between 2 sheets of wax paper, or in this case 2 sheets of parchment, and then I roll it out to my desired size. Now, since I didn't need this right away, I put it back in the refrigerator so that it was ready whenever I needed it. And I did the same thing with the bottom crust as well. And instead of rolling it out on a floured surface, it's a lot less messy, and you can actually, on some parchment papers, you can actually see what your width is. And for a 9-inch pie plate, you're going to need about 12 inches in diameter for your pie. So we are going to put those apples that we just prepped into our pie pan and try to get them as evenly distributed as possible. And you see I had some of that sugar mixture left over. We're just going to put that over the top because it will cook and kind of meld throughout. So at this point, I have about a tablespoon of butter that I've cubed. And you'll find that the butter will just help that flour and sugar and cinnamon mixture along and turn into this beautiful, almost caramel-like syrup that is apple pie. All right, so now we're all set, and I'm going to take my prepared crust for the top and simply and carefully remove my parchment paper and try my best not to remove the pie crust. And if it does kind of pull apart, like I'll show you right here, like it did for me, you can just simply take your finger and push it back together. Now we're going to start unrolling that from our parchment paper. And you want to keep this as cold as you can for as long as you can, because the more you handle it, the softer it's going to get and the harder it's going to be to get off this parchment paper. All right, so I'm going to lay that over the top, and then we are going to carefully remove it. And you can just take your thumb like I'm doing and kind of help it along. And like I said before, if it breaks or if it cracks, that's okay. We are going to be able to come back and fix those minor little errors. Because pie crust is a delicate thing because it is almost equal parts of butter and flour. So it is delicate, but it's not so delicate that it's something to be afraid of. You can always piece it and patch it together. I find that pies that are rustic and not so perfect looking are just as good, sometimes maybe even better than a pie that's just perfect. So I'm going to take this and just work that crust and seal it around the edges of my bottom crust. And you see I'm not touching it for very long, so I'm trying to be fast with it. And this pan that I have is scalloped, so I'm trying to kind of mold the pie crust toward the scallop of the natural scallop of the pan. All right, and like I said, if you have a little tear here and there, you can take little pieces of it and press it in there and patch it. Like I said, you're going to cut this guy so fast, it's not going to matter what it looks like. So we're just going to take a really sharp knife now, and we are going to vent it. I like to say just little bird tracks in the pie because it will cook and it will need to release some steam. So we're going to leave it like that. Then I've got my egg white, and I'm just going to beat it just until it's a little frothy. See, it's a little bubbly. And then I'm going to just brush that over the top of the pie crust, making sure I get those edges, because that will also help seal those edges between the top and the bottom crust. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do, we have about a teaspoon of sugar, and we're just going to sprinkle that right over the top, and that helps caramelize and just make it all brown and pretty. So there we have it. So that is our pie, and like I said, you can have trouble with a homemade pie crust, but you can also have trouble with a store-bought pie crust, but don't sweat it. This is going to cook and it's going to turn into the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen. So it won't matter what it looks like whenever you put it together. Now, one more important step that normally scares a lot of people is a pie that browns too quick around the edges. Now you can buy these wonderful handy dandy little pie guards, I think this is what they're called, but I don't have time for that, and I don't have the storage space for that kind of thing. But what I do always have on hand is aluminum foil. So you can simply take about 14 to 16 inches of aluminum foil and fold it over and take it and wrap it around and just bend it, and then another strip of equal size, and do the same thing, and you have just tinted the edges of your pie. Now, if you do have some trouble getting them to stay together, like oftentimes you will, you can take it and crimp it at the top and just turn it over, and that will help it stay together, just like that. Now you put this in your oven at 375 degrees, and we cook it tinted for 20 to 25 minutes. Then I'll carefully remove it, take the tint off the edges, and cook it for another 20 to 25 minutes until it's golden brown, and you'll know it's ready because your whole house will smell like the holidays. So we're going to do that now, and we'll be back to show you the finished product in just a bit. Hey everybody, we're back. We are right at a 45-minute cook time, and this pie is a thing of real beauty. So we're going to show you now what a cumbersome crust can look like at the end result. and it is gorgeous. It is a little rustic. The apples have created this indentation in the top, and it is perfectly browned, and you can even see a touch of the sugar where it's caramelized in different spaces, and it's a flaky, beautiful golden crust, and we've been really happy with this pie. So the finished product is just this glorious caramel, beautiful cooked apple with that flaky crust, and it's fantastic. Those apples, you can cut them with a fork, and it just is a beautiful thing, and it smells like the holidays in here. So I challenge you this holiday season to try this homemade apple pie, and if you're feeling froggy, go over to the website and get our recipe for our homemade crust too. You'll be really glad you did. So as always, we are so thankful that you joined us today to make this gorgeous apple pie. We hope that you will be sure and subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to ring the bell so that you can be notified whenever we download new content. And if you're not following us on our other social media channels, those will be in the show notes and right here as well. As usual, we check back here often because we love cooking with you guys, and we love having you here with us in our messy kitchen. So from the buttered home to your home, we love y'all. Bye.